You know, we've done a lot together over the years. Me out there saving Azeroth, you asking me to go out there and save Azeroth, and I appreciate our friendship. I do. I just kind of wondered, do you even know what my name is?
Come on, we've known each other for how long now? Of course I know your name, champion.
Right, but that's what I mean. You always just call me champion or hero or whatever. I don't think I've ever actually heard you use my real name.
Well, that's just, I mean, it's out of respect for all you've done. I could call you by your name, but...
Do it then.
What?
Do it. Say my name.
Champion?
I knew it!
I'm sorry!
Ah. What's up, everybody, and welcome back to Sounds Good Makes Sense, a discussion show for the World of Warcraft player. My name is Devilor, and today I want to dig back into the idea of Classic Plus a little bit, and specifically what sort of settings and themes they could explore with new content for Classic Plus, and how that would fit into the overall Warcraft storytelling. And this topic came out of a discussion I was having on stream a few days ago, where we were thinking about, like, where could Blizzard go for both the future of SOD, as well as like further seasons and just generally the concept of what is the future of Classic even like. And so obviously, naturally, we came around to the topic of Classic Plus. And Classic Plus means a lot of different things to a lot of different people, but I think most people still at least assume somewhat that one of the core ideas that would contribute to a Classic Plus, whatever that exists in, would be the idea of new content. So what is that new content and how does that fit into the overall story? And to really dig into this idea, I think it's important to start from kind of trying to define what Classic's approach is to storytelling and the way that storytelling worked in Classic, and compare and contrast that with the modern game. How is storytelling different in retail nowadays, different in Dragonflight, different in the War Within, than it was back in 2004, etc., when they were working on Classic? And one of the big things is that for at least the last few expansions that have come out for the modern game, the story has been really focused around like some sort of big bad or some sort of major crisis that's threatening the world. And then you, as the champion of Azeroth, need to team up with several major important lore characters, and you need to go and solve that issue. And so the entire like package of the expansion tends to revolve around this idea of something bad is happening or is about to happen. And we need to go and solve that. So let's get the band back together. And you, as the champion of Azeroth and almost the central figure in a lot of the story these days, need to go off and solve this problem. In a lot of ways, modern World of Warcraft storytelling is actually starting to come around to what Final Fantasy XIV has been doing for a long time, where like in Final Fantasy XIV, your character is the warrior of light. You're literally the main character of Final Fantasy XIV, and everything else revolves around you. And all of the story ties into what you and your group are doing. And World of Warcraft isn't quite to that level yet. They're not quite making you the main character of Warcraft inside World of Warcraft these days, but it's a lot more, you're a lot more central to the story. You are featured much more regularly, especially with modern technology like the in-game cinematics that are using your actual player model and allowing you to interact with other major lore characters, and you actually see your character actually interacting with them. The player character has become a much more central figure in World of Warcraft these days. And you could make a lot of different arguments about when exactly this shift occurred over the course of World of Warcraft histories. Like, what was the tipping point where the player character became the main character of the story, in a sense, or at least one of the central characters of the story? I would probably make the argument that around the Warlords time frame was when this really started in earnest, when you were set up as the commander of the Horde or the Alliance, and you were tasked with going and starting this garrison inside this new unfamiliar territory so that your entire faction could use that as their home base and go on from there. I would kind of make the argument for Warlords in that case, but the idea of the big bad has been something that's stuck around since, honestly, kind of since TBC, even though like even Blizzard admitted at the time that Illidan kind of was like he was around, but not really. Wrath of the Lich King, we saw the Lich King actually interacting with the player character a lot more often inside the questing experience. So Wrath was maybe the first time that there was really like a big bad central theme for the expansion. But then the concept of you as the player character being much more involved, and then really starting to hinge on lore characters, especially again with more modern things that they're able to do with cutscenes, has come along much more recently. And I want to be clear, this is not a complaint in the slightest. Like, it's not like it's bad or wrong for the game or even something that I dislike. Like, I remember way back in the Cataclysm days, I remember making tank spot videos or talking on Legendary, and basically just complaining about how, like, we spent all this time on the spine of Deathwing. Like, we were up there riding on this dude's back the whole time, and we were fighting for our lives up there. And then Thrall just kind of goes, Pling! And that just solves the problem. Like, why didn't you do that from the beginning? And why are all of my efforts, why is Thrall stealing my kill, essentially, was my complaint back in the Cataclysm days. Because even back then, they were really starting to focus a lot more on like cinematic storytelling and like having a plot that is being followed as part of the storytelling. And it felt out of place for the player character to be like interacting with all these characters until something interesting happened. So I do really like and enjoy that modern World of Warcraft storytelling is involving the player character much more often. It's just worth noting that's something very different to how storytelling existed back in like the classic TBC and even the Wrath of the Lich King days. And it's much easier to see nowadays because you can go play Dragonflight and then go play like SOD or Classic Era even for that matter. And you can really see the stark difference in how story is approached and how you interact with the world and what's going on around you. And if in the modern game, Dragonflight, War Within, etc., the player character and these other major lore characters are sort of the star of the show, I actually think the big difference for Classic is that the world is the star of the show. And I don't mean in a like, oh, Azeroth is a character that you go and talk to and Magni hangs out with Azeroth and blah, blah, blah. I don't mean like as an actual interactable character. I mean that the star of Classic was, here's a world, go and explore it and see what's going on and go find things. We've helpfully labeled them with little question marks over their heads or exclamation marks over their heads. Go find things. You just kind of exist in this world, go out and explore it and see what you can get into. And once you've sort of narrowed down that concept of the world being the star of the show in the Classic sort of environment, the way that things were done back in Classic, that philosophy, that really to me leads directly into a way of how I think Classic Plus or future seasons or whatever else could really start to explore storytelling. And they're already kind of doing a little bit of this in Season of Discovery, but could really start to explore storytelling and coming up with their own new stuff that's new content and it's interesting and it ties into the overall theme of the world without going too far down the road of what we've now got in the modern game, where your player character is kind of the central figure and it's more about that specific story. Really, it's the idea for Classic of getting back to the concept of world building, which is a very different type of storytelling. Like traditional storytelling where you have a plot and you have like okay, here's the intro, here's the cadence throughout the thing, here's the climax of the story, and then here's the whatever the weird word is that means the end of the denouement, I think is the end of it. Here's the end of everything that's going on. That's how modern expansions have been more or less written, is the idea of we have a build up and then we have a payoff, essentially. Rather than focusing so much on that, the concept of world building tends to be much more about like little stories here and there. It's the idea of making the world feel like people actually live here. People actually have their own littler problems. Like not everything is about solving the most imminent, hugest crisis that's actually going on. Sometimes you've got a guy with a shop and there are rats eating his merchandise. And that's the sort of thing that needs to be solved over here. Or there's someone over here and they are a pirate captain and they're trying to do an incursion into this little area, but they're being pushed away by murlocs or whatever. Like, okay, go clear out some of the murlocs so that the pirate captain can go do pirate stuff or whatever. Like, this is the sort of thing that helps make the world feel like people actually live here and people are actually doing things, which to me ends up being just as immersive as the modern retail storytelling, where you see your character and you feel like you directly are immersed in the story. To me, that world building sort of thing feels immersive in a different way, where it's more like, yeah, I'm just here, man. I'm just walking around and looking at this stuff and I get to see what's going on and I can participate in some of it. I can choose not to participate in it. I don't necessarily have to do everything. Like right now, if you're questing to level an SOD, which is what I've been doing a bunch of the last 2 days, you can just decide like, yeah, sorry, dude, your problem is not my problem. So I'm just not going to deal with it. You can do that in that sort of environment. It's much more about building out this world and just letting players explore it as a result. And so what that means is that these stories tend to be much more like lower stakes on average. Like you can still have higher stakes. You can still have like the big, like, oh, there's a problem that needs to be solved. And, oh, it's good that someone resolved this. But it's just like you as an adventurer taking on a task that someone's asked you to do. You're not the chosen one. You're not the champion of Azeroth. You're not the commander who as soon as you walk in the room, all of the various leadership breathes a sigh of relief, like, oh yes, they're here, they're going to solve it. No, it doesn't need to be that. It's just little things that are going on around the world. It's like, okay, I am an adventurer. The concept literally of I am an adventurer. So what I do is I go out and look for adventures to have. What are some adventures that I can go and do? And they don't all need to be this existential thing. They can just be little things. To use a more direct example, because I know I'm speaking in a lot of vague terms right now, so I want to give some examples of the kind of thing that I'm thinking about as I'm saying this, because that might help paint a little bit better of a picture. I'm talking about things like looking at the aftermath or even the build up to big events, like things that have occurred inside Warcraft lore already, things that have already happened inside the lore of Warcraft, especially things that have been established by World of Warcraft. Let's look at what happened after that immediately, or let's look at what happened before that. Here, a couple direct examples. So Dalaran, it was in a bubble all the way up until Wrath. What was going on in that bubble? That's the sort of thing that we could explore with this idea a little bit. Maybe in some sort of season or something, we go and part of it is like, hey, we've infiltrated Dalaran and we've gotten into their bubble. Let's figure out what's going on here. And this is just like a little quest chain. This isn't like the point of the entire thing. It's not World of Warcraft Classic, the Dalaran experience or whatever. No, this is just some little thing that you can go and do. Another example that came to mind, a zone that's always intrigued me is Twilight Highlands from Cataclysm. And part of why it's intrigued me so much is because when you first experience this zone in Cataclysm, you get there and it's already being held by the Twilight's hammer, and it's already being somewhat devastated, and all the dwarves that live up there are already being displaced, and a whole bunch of bad stuff has already happened. I would love a version of Classic or a season or something that just has some quests over there prior to the Twilight's hammer ever showing up. Take the zone, remove, and I know this is a lot of work for an art team, but bear with me. Take the zone, remove all the take the zone as it exists in Cataclysm, remove all the Twilight stuff, just let it be a dwarven zone, and just go over there and see what those dwarves were all about, see what they were up to. And perhaps an aftermath example could be the Nerubians in Wrath of the Lich King. I know we're getting a lot more Nerubian stuff right now in the War Within, but this is a different sect of Nerubians. I specifically want to know what's going on in Ajal Nerub, especially once Anub Arak has been defeated and the Lich King has been defeated. What actually happened there? What happened to all those guys after Bolvar took over as the Lich King and after all this other stuff happened? Explain to me. I want to go and explore and see what's going on up there. This is also the sort of concept that could give us an opportunity to reconnect with some characters who they always seemed like they had something going on. There always something interesting about this character, but we never really got to fully explore it as much as we would have liked. On the higher end of how I'm talking about, relatively minor characters, not ones that have become major characters over the years. Even someone like Lillian Voss, I would probably say is probably a little bit too mainstream for what I'm thinking right now. I'm thinking more like Archmage Vargoth, Darius Crowley, who was the prisoner Worgen that you helped get out in the whole Worgen intro experience. Magatha Grim Totem would be one who obviously she's had some major impacts on lore over the years, but what the heck is she actually up to? And what are the Grim Totems doing? What's their whole deal other than occasionally just being mildly evil? These are the sorts of characters. And again, those are probably at the upper echelon, the more well-known of characters, the more rounded out of characters that I would really want to mess with something like this. Honestly, I think just look around the map, find a character that has never revealed ever again or never showed up ever again, or has only had little minor things here and there. Look at those characters. So, heck, let's give Ziz Physics. You remember the goblin from Stone Talon Mountains that just really hates that the venture company is there? Let's give him some more stuff to do. Let's go and find Blood Mage, what's her name? Blood Mage Lenore from Blasted Lands, right outside of Netherguard Keep. She was around and she kind of had some stuff in Cataclysm, but there's a lot more that could theoretically be done. What is her deal? What's going on with blood mages? What is she actually up to? Let's explore that a little bit more. One I'd love to see, Kinalori and Quay from the Arathi Highlands, the Alliance quest that you go and you explore, and you have a little escort that goes around the Golshek farm that's out there. Love to see those characters fleshed out a little bit more and see more done with them. And these don't need to be, again, I'm not talking about making them into main characters. I'm not talking about your character then needs to get Vargoth and Quay and Kinalori together and you're all going to go and take on Sargeras or whatever. That's very not what I'm talking about here. I'm just saying, like, this would be a good opportunity as we're building out this world, as this the concept of let's just make the world feel more lived in. Let's find things that are like little stories we can tell here and there around the map. These are great opportunities to explore. Give them like a quest chain or two. Maybe they eventually point you towards a dungeon, but like the dungeon has its own thing going on, and they just want you to do something that's in there, and like that sort of level of thing. Kind of like how like Zul'Farrak, for example, is a dungeon where there's like 8 different people that want you to go into Zul'Farrak for different reasons, but they don't want you to go into Zul'Farrak to kill the big bad guy that's in there. Like the end boss of Zul'Farrak is just kind of there as well. Yeah, it's his house. Of course he's there. The most of what they actually want you to do inside Zul'Farrak is like, hey, there's some scarabs in there. They're special. Could you bring me some of their shells? And just stuff like that. Again, this is all just supplemental storytelling. This is stuff that helps make the world feel more alive and more lived in by presenting situations where, yeah, here's a character that you interact with who their problem is relatively minor compared to the grand scheme of things. Like, this is not someone who's worried about the fact that Ragnaros is about to pop out a molten core at any moment in time. This is someone who's literally just like, I kind of want some of these cool shells, which is how you build out a world and how you make things more feeling lived in, essentially, is the term that it will continue to come back to for me. Making it more about world building and less about having one big problem that needs solving. And in a lot of ways, this kind of would reflect on how World of Warcraft interacted with Warcraft 3. Like, some of my fondest memories from when I first started playing WoW all the way back in 2004 were things like I made my first undead character and I walked into the Lordaeron throne room and I was like, oh my God, this is the spot where Arthas came back and killed King Menethil. And there's the blood stain on the ground where the crown fell. Like, as a Warcraft lore nerd, it was something that was like, oh my God, this is so cool that I'm getting to stand in this spot. I think if we could get to points where it's like, okay, now let's look at what retail did. All right, this is the room deep under Orgrimmar where Garrosh Hellscream was finished off. And killed was not the right word there, but where Garrosh Hellscream was defeated. And let's look at some of the like stuff that's happening. Wow, this is cool stuff that I get to just walk around and see. And obviously you can just do that in the retail game as well, but having it feel more from that perspective of I'm just some guy in this game. I'm just a character that also exists, and I'm able to go and explore these different areas and maybe have like little tasks to do in there. Or even it's just there and you just go and you look at it. Actually, thinking about that, this is completely, I didn't even make a note for this one, but this is another thing that just occurred to me mid-sentence. It would be cool to utilize some raid instance environments and just have those be places that then become quest hubs or whatever inside of this. Like, actually utilize some of those environments and be like, cool, you've gone into the Siege of Orgrimmar like section, but this is just like an underground area of Orgrimmar now. That it's like it's still there. What do we do with all of this dug out stuff underneath? Did they fill it in afterwards? Like, what's actually going on with all this stuff that was underneath Orgrimmar after the Siege of Orgrimmar? That'd be an interesting thing to kind of explore a bit. And there's lots of raid instances like that you could still go and like what's happening in the Molten Core post Ragnaros. Like, these are all things that you could go and utilize for the idea of continued storytelling and world building inside of a classic archetype. I just think a big part of making this work would have to be that commitment to the idea that your character stays relatively unimportant, not like unknown, but like the sort of thing that like maybe the bards have a song or two about some stuff that you've done before, and maybe people here and there recognize you for one or two of your deeds, but you're never like showing up in a room and you're like, hey, it's me, I'm here, and the leader of the Alliance and Horde both go, oh, thank God it's you. You're the one that's going to solve this problem for us. I think you should just be an adventurer who's maybe a storied adventurer, but an adventurer nonetheless. As far as the logistics of how this would occur and how this stuff could be put into a game, I don't know, maybe it could be something where there's like Blizzard eventually decides, yes, we're doing it. We're releasing Classic Plus, and it's going to be a entirely separate game that exists alongside the mainline World of Warcraft. This is WoW, and then this is WoW Classic, and they're going to exist alongside each other, and we're going to come out with these expansions for this over time. That could work. I think that's definitely a reasonable way to go about it. Part of me, though, really wants to see them lean into the season idea more and actually just really explore the concept of like, okay, here's a new season. Maybe there's some way that from previous seasons you can bring your character over or something so that people can feel like they're still playing the same guy and so on. But the idea of, okay, this season is all about what's going on in Dalaran and what's going on over here and what's going on over here. Like, these are the areas that we're exploring in this season. These are the areas that we're exploring in this season. It could even be the sort of thing where it's like, all right, this is just new level 60 content. Honestly, I would probably want them to try and do this at like the level 70 or level 80 sort of paradigm, just because there were a bunch of mechanical changes that occurred going into TBC that made it so that you didn't just have infinitely scaling. Like, basically they put hit rating and crit rating and so on in the game so that you didn't end up with just infinite amounts of hit and crit. But that's kind of just getting into the logistics of this. This is more talking about the story and so on at the moment, and how this could actually fit and what sort of content could be explored. I don't know. I think it would be really cool. The purpose of this video is mostly just to tell you guys, hey, here's this cool idea that I think I have, and see what you guys think about it. But honestly, I would love to see Blizzard really take the opportunity to say, Modern WoW is about a specific story that happens to a group of characters with the player character as a central figure among them. And that's fine. That's great. We keep doing that. But let's also have a version of WoW that sticks to the more classic concept of things, where you're just some guy and you're going around in the world and things are happening around you, and you're not there to solve everyone's problems. You're just there to be someone exploring the world. But I'm real curious what you all think as well. If this is the sort of thing that, especially if you're a classic fan, if this is the sort of thing that you would like to see more content along these lines. I do think we're starting to see some things along these lines already happening in SOD. For example, there's a popular theory that the sort of void character that we've encountered a few times throughout the season of Discovery is actually like Xalatath, and this is what she was doing all the way back during the classic days, and something going along in that regard. I think that would be really interesting, but I'd love to see more tie-ins with other things that have occurred outside of or throughout the Warcraft history and so on. I'd love to see more stuff like that happening. And as we really think about like where, now that we have SOD and now that we've seen that, yes, this is a concept that works, what do we do with this idea next? When the season is over, do we just say, okay, well, that was fun and now it's gone? I really hope not. So this is the sort of thing that I think would be cool to see, but I'm really curious to hear all of your thoughts as well. And that's going to wrap us up for today. Thank you all so much for watching. As always, thank you so much to all of my patrons. If you haven't checked out my Patreon yet, you can go to patreon.com/Devilore. Give a look over there. Patrons get some cool perks, such as an audio-only version of this, which you can listen to both through your standard podcast RSS feed setup, but it's also available specifically to people who have connected their Patreon to Spotify. You can listen to all of the episodes on there. If you're the sort of person that just wants to listen to me ramble instead of looking at my stupid face the whole time, that's an option that's available for you if you are a patron. You also get early-ish access. I don't hype this up too much because it only ends up being like about 8 to 12 hours most of the time. But basically, as soon as I'm done editing, as I'm talking right now, as soon as I'm done editing this together, I'm going to upload it to Patreon. And so our patrons get a little bit of an earlier look of things on there. I actually owe a monthly update video, which I will be getting that out here. It's going to be a little bit delayed because of some other stuff that's going on, but I have a monthly update video that'll be coming along very soon, where I give lots of updates on how things are going now that I'm a full-time content creator again, what sort of things I'm thinking about doing, what sort of direction that I'm moving things in, and what sort of content I'm looking to produce over the next month. So lots of stuff along those lines you can check out over on Patreon. You can also go to devilore.com. That's where my merch store is. You can buy some cool Sounds Good Makes Sense merch, like this mug, which is totally dope. I love this mug. I use it almost every day. But anyway, I'm gonna stop advertising myself now. Thank you all so much once again for watching, and I'll see you next time.